got a fucking chain! You motherfuckers killed my fucking brother! Fuck you!
So, even when we can. One boy on the pier taking one boy taking
Get out of the way! Get out of the way! This is your last warning. Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Fuck the police, baby!
Leanne?
Yeah, David, I just stepped out to the side. We just had the group throw a couple of large rocks at police here, and then they opened fire with the non-lethal. You can hear a couple going off here. They also fired a couple of smoke bombs here to kind of break up the crowd. See, can you see that? They're just throwing large projectiles now at the police on the front line. I just saw one officer take one kind of to her arm, to her chest there. This is an example of what they are throwing at the crowd. Rocks. I mean, these are pretty sizable rocks and certainly can cause some damage. As we know, an LAPD officer yesterday ended up with a fractured skull because a protester threw a brick hitting him in the head.
High arc, watch that.
This is also the moment when the curfew hits where there are those last few remaining protesters. Sometimes it's something else, but they want to make a statement. They want this confrontation to happen. The vast majority, though...
See, they're running now, yeah.
That's a good example right there.
Yeah, just right.
Yeah, so he's shooting from up above. You can see him firing the less lethal rounds into the crowd. So that's another kind of yeah, they're very loud.
Is that
loud.
like an M80
like
that we just saw blast?
Distraction. Yeah.
Who's that coming from?
M80 that they're
protesters?
throwing this way.
The protesters are throwing those big blasts.
That's coming from the protesters.
You're right.
Yes. They are the ones throwing the M80s and the fireworks towards police, yes.
Okay, and then this...
So anything with the sparklers and that kind of thing you see, those are the fireworks being thrown by protesters towards police, towards the line.
This is the part where some of the more energetic protesters want to make a statement. They want a confrontation with police. And we've even stated this earlier today, and sometimes it's a badge of honor to get arrested protesting and making your point. And so this is the confrontation that a minority of people want with PD. They want a confrontation. And it's happening in Santa Monica right now.
Fireworks, those M80s, you know, that could blow someone's hand off. And we've seen the protesters using them. I mean, I heard them all throughout the evening last night in downtown Los Angeles, just hearing them go off. And it's a tactic that's being used to fire at those officers in retaliation to possibly the tear gas are being forced to move back.
Here's that every time the protesters throw something towards police, a return of those less lethal rounds occurs. And so it's kind of a back and forth volley between them with what they're throwing. So yeah, I see the officer firing. Every once in a while you'll see him firing.
At this point, we have to remember this is an unlawful assembly. The curfew is already in place. So technically everybody here now is breaking the law.
They're throwing a bunch of small fireworks I can hear going off in the crowd. That's why people are also running over there. So again, the police here continue to fire less lethal rounds towards them, again trying to get them to...
David. This is a very tense standoff that is developing here right at the foot of the Santa Monica Pier. There is a strong line of Santa Monica police officers that are basically in a standoff with these protesters right here who are stealing doors from a construction site to form a blockade right there where PCH meets Ocean. You take a look at that, I think is it an apartment building? I think it's a residential building, but I'm not exactly sure. On the right-hand side there, you can see the first floor is boarded up. It is an apartment building. And just a minute ago, a fire extinguisher was being sprayed from an upper floor window from that second floor. Somebody is in that building spraying a fire extinguisher. Then the fire extinguisher came flying out the window. So somebody inside that building is participating in this pandemonium. But pandemonium it is down there, as shots are currently being fired intermittently at these protesters and at these people who are forming this blockade. But this group right here behind, I'm talking about the group, that first line of protesters who are the ones that just formed that barricade. They're using construction barricades, and they're using stolen equipment and stolen doors, plywood from that construction site, which is right next to here. They have now formed a solid barricade and you're talking about a crowd of, I would say, at least 100 people, if not more, that are right there at the intersection. And again, just down the block, if we go ahead and pull out just a little bit, you can see the stance that the Santa Monica Police Department is taking here. They are taking this as aggressive action as they were trying to build that blockade. Those shots were being fired at those protesters who are forming that blockade, if you will.
Was talking about. You can see them putting up all that plywood, all those doors, and they're trying to double it up here. And you can see a lot of these protesters that are literally walking out, kind of taunting the police to shoot them with these non-lethal rounds. Can you see this, the canister there, the red canister? I was trying to say that they had used, Chris was talking about that they'd taken it from that fire extinguisher. They'd taken it from the building, that apartment complex, and they'd sprayed it towards the police. They then threw it through the crowd. We watched this huge fire extinguisher go flying through the crowd, landing in the street there. So this has taken a serious turn. So far, police have not changed their tactic. They remain here in the line, the skirmish line right here, and have not moved at all. But you can see those protesters really kind of building in strength and their confidence in trying to take on the police, it seems. One of the concerns for authorities is that they have a large group up on the high ground, as they call it. They're kind of up on that overlook. That is a big safety concern for police here. That is one of the reasons why they are not taking immediate action, because that puts them really at great risk, because they have those protesters kind of up above with a different vantage point. So that has put them at risk. Their stance, you can tell that they feel like they are gaining some strength in this, and kind of really standing up to the police more. So this standoff, I would say the tension here definitely escalating as this continues right here on Ocean Boulevard in Santa Monica.
Yeah, you could feel the tension just through your images from the ground. I was going to bring in Chris Christie into this conversation as well. So, Chris, you're watching from overhead. It does seem like that crowd is large now and getting more and more unified. The police have lost ground to this crowd since you got there. They've moved forward. What is backing up the police right now until those law enforcement reserves get there? Who's supporting that police line that we're seeing?
Well, that's a great question. To be honest with you, I only see that group of Santa Monica police officers. That skirmish line right there is really all that I see. You're talking about a couple of dozen officers, and that's basically about it. Behind them, I don't see a whole lot of backup. This has been a concern of mine all day when you consider the Santa Monica Police Department compared to the resources of the LAPD. There's a gap there. I'm sure that they have plans to bring in other reinforcements, and perhaps at some point, like we've been talking about, even the National Guard if it's necessary. But in this case here, this is a standoff. They are taunting these police officers. They have lost a little ground. You see some folks coming in front of the barricade. It does look like there's a mediator trying to keep them behind the barricade, but this is all an unlawful assembly at this point, and nobody here is really acting orderly.
Oh, somebody just throwing out. So somebody's inside this abandoned building. So that's an area of concern. That's where they were getting the plywood, I can see now. This abandoned building, and somebody's in there throwing a glass bottle there. Yeah, they're up in the second story window there. Yeah, so you can see what we're talking about. And look, you can see these rocks. This is what has been thrown at these officers standing on the very front. I mean, these are large rocks, as you just saw a moment ago. Several bottles, glass bottles were thrown at police towards the front line.
Situations like this, it's getting very dicey. It's getting frightening. We hope that this starts to calm down, but it looks like the trend right now is that things are getting heated. We're seeing fires start. We're seeing cars on fire, buildings on fire, and a complete grocery store, Vaughn's and a pharmacy, looted, and it looks like that was going to be gutted in no time with looters. And then now you see this vehicle on fire next to what we believe is a civic center.
Veronica Miracle, she is live in our Content Command Center with more on this. Veronica?
Well, Colleen, when we started at noon, the protest in Santa Monica was very peaceful. There were a couple hundred people marching through the streets, but then it quickly devolved when there were some agitators that came in. Take a look at the video here, and we're just going to show you all of the different scenes that we saw play out over the last couple of hours, starting at noon all the way until right now. So what you're taking a look at is kind of the start of that looting that we saw. Some people going in and smashing the windows to a shoe store, and we saw this man in particular with the yellow gloves really show us that it was such an organized crime situation here. You know, they had garbage bags, their masks covering their faces, this man here with just loads of merchandise in his arms. And in fact, that black car there, we'll come back to that in a little bit, but that's a getaway car, one of many that we saw positioned throughout Santa Monica. I want to be very clear. These guys are completely separate from the protesters. They use the protest in order to cloak themselves to not get caught, because we have seen so many of these protesters, or these looters rather, go into stores and get away with so much merchandise. You see another guy there with shoe boxes, and then this here is a row of cars, actually. All of these cars are working together. They're all getaway cars. They're stuffing stuff into the trunk. They're coordinating with each other. They were talking amongst each other, and it really shows just the coordination and this organized crime here, completely separate from the protests. See, there's another man there completely just covering up and taking those boxes. We saw also a lot of people take shoes out of the shoe boxes, ditch the boxes, so there's just boxes littered everywhere in some.
All right. We were just talking with Veronica Miracle. We'll check back in with